welcome to this video where we'll explore how we can use Git from the command line. In this particular video, we'll see how we can set up the working directory as well as the staging area. Okay, so we'll understand these terms as we go along in the video. So in order for me to illustrate this in the most simplest way, what I've done is within Visual Studio Code, I have created a folder called Learn Git, and there are a couple of files here, an index.html and a CSS file, right? So what I'm also going to do at the same time is I'm going to create a repository on my GitHub account. So let me just go in and create that. I'm going to call it Learn Git. I'm going to give it the same name. Okay, for now, I'm just going to keep it public. I'm not going to add any files at this point in time, nor am I going to make any changes here. I'm just going to create a repository right away. Okay, perfect. So as you can see, this is an empty repository right now. It doesn't have any files. It gives me a set of commands that I can create, that I can execute, to push files onto this repository. Okay. So first, let's initialize the working directory. So now what is the working directory? So now there is a local Git repository that we need to create within this particular folder called Learn Git. Okay, so we have to set it up initially. So there are a couple of ways by which we could do it. If you're working with Visual Studio Code, you can just click on Terminal, click on the new Terminal tab here, and you could just type in your commands right away, or you could even open the terminal window if you want to. So, if you want to open the terminal window, you can basically go to that specific folder and run your Git commands. So since we already have everything set up on Visual Studio Code, we can run the commands from here. Okay, so let me run the first command, which is basically to set up the working directory or the local Git repository, as we call it. So let me just set it up. The command is git init as in initialize. So let me just execute it. There you go. So it's been initialized here, and it basically says that an empty Git repository has been created, and it's in this particular location. That means within the Learn Git folder, we have another folder here called .git, but I cannot see that on the left-hand side. So why is that? So it's a hidden folder. It's not directly visible. So I can open that folder here. Let me just show that to you. Okay, so I've just opened my Finder window here. I can see these individual files in Learn Git. I can also see a hidden folder here, right? So if you want to see hidden folders within your, say, Mac machine, you can just use Command Shift and the dot key, right? Okay, so if I were to open this particular folder right now, a bunch of folders, subfolders created here. We don't need to worry about it too much. So this will basically help us keep track of whatever changes that we are doing in this main folder Learn Git. So as we are right now in the status right now, it is basically keeping track of this folder, right? The moment we initialized it, it's keeping track of this folder. So how do we actually know that it's being tracked? So the moment we initialized the repository, if you have noticed, in Visual Studio Code, there is also a Git control option here. So you can see that it's already saying that there are 3 pending changes. So it's already started to keep track of what's happening within your folder. So there's a great way by which we can, understand this using the command line as well. So you can just type in git status. Okay, let me just type this. There you go. So we can find a few pieces of information. It says on branch master. So we haven't come to that aspect yet, which we'll be covering a little later in one of the next videos. And it also says no commits yet. So these aspects we'll be covering a little later. But what's important to understand is it says untracked files. Okay. So these are the files. This is the temporary DS store file, but the other 2 files we are interested in, which is the index.html and style.css. So what this means by saying untracked is we have a working directory called Learn Git, And there are two files which are not set up to the staging area. So what happens is you have a working directory, you have a staging area, and then finally you commit it and push it to the remote repository. Okay, so how do you move something from the working directory to the staging area so that you will be ready to commit it? So that's what we're going to understand. So even when I typed in git status and when it showed the untracked files which are displayed in red, it also gave me a hint over here. I mean, it prompted me saying that you can use git add and the name of the file to include it into the staging area. Right. So whatever we move to the staging area is what is going to be committed later on. Okay, perfect. So let's see how we could do this. So I'll say git add, and then I can go in and specify the name of the file. Say, for example, I could just go in and say index.html. So let's just add this file alone and see what happens here. Okay, there is no message, there's no error message as well. So everything seems to be okay, right? So let me just run git status once again and see what happens. Okay, so now we see that it says changes to be committed. It says that there is a new file that has been added to the staging area and it's called index.html. Okay, but there is an untracked file here which is still residing here, which is style.css. Okay, so that's interesting. So that means I can individually add the files. But what if I have a whole bunch of files, maybe 100 files? I can't go in and say git add every individual file, right? I cannot go and type in the commands those many times. So how do I go about it? So that's where we have this option of saying git add. I could just type in all using two hyphens, or I could just type in hyphen and a capital A, which basically means all the files. So let me just go and execute this. Okay, great. So now I'll just try git status. Okay, perfect. So now I have all the files that I need. So now you would be thinking, I do not need ds_store. That's a file that I don't need, right? So there is an option by which you can remove a file as well. So we'll see that right now. So I have the index.html, style.css, both files are now added to the staging area. That means from the working directory, I have moved it to the staging area. So now it gives me the option to remove a particular file as well. So let's do that. I can just say git rm as in remove, cached as in what is already in the staging area, and then the name of the file. So I can just go in and put this here. Okay. So this basically only removes it from the staging area. It lies in the working directory. The file is not physically removed from the folder. Okay. So let me just press enter to this. Okay, there it says. So now it says that this particular file has been removed. So we need to know what is the status here. So initially when you're working with the command line, it's always best that you run this git status command to know exactly what has happened under the hood. So let me just type this in. There you go. So now we have the files that we want: index.html, style.css, and ds_store. So I think you already have a doubt in your mind, like, okay, what if I do git add a once again, right? So this file is going to be added, right? So that's where we'll explore git ignore in one of the later videos. Okay, perfect. So now we've set up the staging area. So now the next aspect that we'll also cover in the staging area is what happens if I go and edit one of these files. So let's see what happens here. So I'll go into index.html and add an h2 tag. Okay, I'm just going to type in a text here. Okay, there you go. So I've made some changes to it and I can already see on the interface that it shows that there are more pending changes, right? So let's go in and check that out. So let me go into git status once again, because now the working directory is constantly being tracked by Git. from the time we initialized it. So now let's go in and try get status. There you go. So what does it say? It says that a file has been modified. Okay, so it's able to identify that index.html has been modified. It didn't mention anything about style.css, so that's sorted. It's already there in the staging area. There's no modification done, right? And it also mentions that the untracked file is as it is, right? So now I don't want to give git add all because I know there's only one file that has changed. So I can go in and specify that file. Okay, let me just go in and specify it. Okay, so I can try git status once again. There you go. So I got the files that I needed to the staging area. Okay, so this is how you could work with Git in the command line. So this is just the initial video to get you started. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you in the next one.